The gods at play. The playground of the gods was situated on the green plain of Ida and was called Idavold. Here the gods would resort when in sportive mood, and their favorite game was to throw their golden discs, which they would cast with great skill. They had returned to this wonted pastime with redoubled zest, since the cloud which had oppressed their spirits had been dispersed by the precautions of Frigga. Wearied at last, however, of the accustomed sport, they bethought them a new game. They had learned that Balder could not be harmed by any missile, and so they amused themselves by casting all manner of weapons, stones, etc. at him, certain that no matter how cleverly they tried and how accurately they aimed, the objects, having sworn not to injure him, would either glance aside or fall short. This new amusement proved to be so fascinating that soon all the gods gathered around Balder, greeting each new failure to hurt him with prolonged shouts of laughter. The death of Balder. These bursts of merriment excited the curiosity of Frigga, who sat spinning in Fensalir, and seeing an old woman pass by her dwelling, she bade her pause and tell her what the gods were doing to provoke such great hilarity. The old woman was none other than Loki in disguise, and he answered Frigga the gods were throwing stones and other missiles, blunt and sharp, at Balder, who stood smiling and unharmed in their midst, challenging them to touch him. The goddess smiled and resumed her work, saying that it was quite natural that nothing should harm Balder, as all things loved the light, of which he was the emblem, and had solemnly sworn not to injure him. Loki, the personification of fire, was greatly chagrined upon hearing this, for he was jealous of Balder, the sun, who so entirely eclipsed him, and who is generally beloved, while he was feared and avoided as much as possible. But he cleverly concealed his vexation, and inquired of Frigga whether she were quite sure that all objects had joined the league. Frigga proudly answered that she had received the solemn oath of all things. A harmless little parasite, the mistletoe, which grew on the oak near Valhalla's gate, only excepted, and this was too small and weak to be feared. This information was all that Loki wanted, and, bidding adieu to Frigga, he hobbled off. As soon as he was safely out of sight, however, he resumed his wonted form, and hastened to Valhalla, where, at the gate, he found the oak and mistletoe, as indicated by Frigga. Then, by the exercise of magic arts, he imparted to the parasite a size and hardness quite unnatural to it. From the wooden stem thus produced, he deftly fashioned a shaft, with which he hastened back to Idavold, where the gods were still hurling missiles at Balder. Hoder alone, leaning mournfully against a tree all the while, and taking no part in the game. Carelessly, Loki approached the blind god, and assuming an appearance of interest, he inquired the cause of his melancholy, at the same time artfully insinuating that pride and indifference prevented him from participating in the sport. In answer to these remarks, Hoder pleaded that only his blindness deterred him from taking part in the new game. And when Loki put the mistletoe shaft in his hand and led him into the midst of the circle, indicating the direction of the novel target, Hoder threw his shaft boldly, but to his dismay, instead of the loud laughter which he expected, a shuddering cry of horror fell upon his ear, for Balder the Beautiful had fallen to the ground, pierced by the fatal mistletoe. So on the floor lay Balder dead, and round lay thickly strewn swords, axes, darts, and spears, which all the gods in sport had idly thrown at Balder, whom no weapon pierced or clove. But in his breast stood fixed the fatal bough of mistletoe which Loke the accuser gave to Hoder, and unwitting Hoder threw. Against that alone had Balder's life no charm. Balder Dead by Matthew Arnold. In dire anxiety, the gods crowded around their beloved companion, but alas, life was quite extinct, and all their efforts to revive the fallen sun god were unavailing. Inconsolable at their loss, they now turned angrily upon Hoder, whom they would there and then have slain, had they not been restrained by the law of the gods, that no willful deed of violence should desecrate their peace steads. The sound of their loud lamentation brought the goddesses in hot haste to the dreadful scene, and when Frigga saw that her darling was dead, she passionately implored the gods to go to Niflheim and entreat Hel to release her victim, for the earth could not exist happily without him. So those were The Gods at Play and the Death of Balder, the 4th and 5th sections of Chapter 21 of Myths of the Norsemen by Helene A Guerber, Balder. I will be working my way through this book section by section, and if there are any other public domain books that you would like for me to read, please leave a comment below. Did you enjoy this video? Then subscribe for more, and be sure to check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely evening.